Hello everyone, my name is TamTroll and this is Goblins of Elderstone, and this is going to be my tutorial guide on how to proceed past the tutorial. I have been playing this game for about 5 years now, since almost near when it was first released into early access, and as a result I have a lot of experience with the game. Now, one thing I do want to make clear is I am biased. Some of my methods and some of my advice may be outdated or may no longer be necessary, so take that with a grain of salt. That said, let's begin. So, going in, you will be presented with 3 options: story creation, pantheon creation, and random creation. Now, these options are primarily just to select your gods. There is no major difference between any of them. Story creation primarily just gives you different options that will allow you, different options that choose different gods for you. You can be evil, you can be war focused, you can be trade focused, you can be magic focused. None of it matters. None of these options will restrict you or grant you any additional abilities than any of the other options. So if you are more interested in picking and choosing your gods, then you can absolutely go to the Pantheon creation and you will not miss out on anything. There are currently 8 gods in the Pantheon. Iridan, Copperface, Moongast, Warjoy, Furymane, Golden Tongue, Zagorite, and Silverfay. Each choice you make in the story creation method will give you one of these 8 gods, with the end result being 4. In Pantheon, if you really want, you can start the game with just 1. And each of these gods has their own unique abilities and boons that they will give you. Now, these boons are not immediately available. They are typically the most passive one you can see. So, for Iridan, your peons will get an additional 2 sticks when harvesting, and an additional 2 logs. With Copperface, you will get 1 additional baby per year. With a Moongast, your shamans will cleanse gravestones faster. Warjoy will increase the chance of goblins being born into the war faction. Furymane will increase the chance of birthing goblins with the Berserker trait. Golden Tongue will give you a discount when purchasing resources from a traveling merchant. Zagorite will increase the chance of birthing faith-blessed goblins. And Silverfay will increase the chance of birthing goblins with the Zealot trait. Now notice all of these are passives. The other 2 are more active ones. You need to spend Juju in the spellbook. I will show you those later. Now, when you choose your creation method, and again, it ultimately doesn't matter which one you choose, you will just have your gods. For the sake of argument, we are going to choose the story mode here and just pick some random ones. Our resulting Pantheon is going to be Golden Tongue, Moongast, Silverfay, who is the best goddess, and Iridan. Now we will begin our campaign. So, this is the village location selection. You can name your village. This is ultimately not super important. I'm not entirely sure when it shows up. I believe it's just when you're on a world map. So, we will be the village of testing here. You have 3 map sizes that can determine your gameplay. You can have small, you can have medium, and you can have large. Personally, I like to go large myself. If you don't like the layout of the map you get, simply switching to a different one and then switching back will grant you a different layout. Down here, you will see the resources and threat that each individual tile will get you. You can see which tile you have selected by the little glow around it. When you click a tile, you will see that these resources will change. Personally, I like to go for tiles like this one that have moderate in everything, or moderate in everything but low in threat. You should click around the map to see which one you prefer best. Some are better than others depending on playstyle. As a general rule, I feel forests will give you more Forests will generally give you more wood. Mountains will generally give you more stone. Plains, I believe, will generally give you more food. I could be wrong on this. This could just be a guess. It might be completely up to chance. The terrain you get in each tile will also differ. The plains biome will give you a large, flat area with very few bumps in it. The downside to this is that forests, or elder trees, which are these which generate trees and wood for you, are generally more spaced out, as are larger mines such as stone and iron. A forest biome will generally have more variety in terrain elevation, but have more clustered together resources, more abundant trees and berry bushes, among other things. And a mountain biome will have a much wider variety in terrain elevation, as well as more abundant iron and stone resources. Generally fewer trees and berries. Again, all of this widely depends on which tile you selected, which resources they got. The main thing you're looking out for is terrain alterations, I believe, and as well as specific landmarks. I'm not entirely certain on this particular section, so there may not be as many differences as I'm listing here. This is just, in general, what I have observed over the years. This screen is your clan creation menu. Now, some of it will be filled out for you initially, but you can simply add or remove them by dragging and dropping them at your leisure. This title up here is the name of your clan. Every goblin in your clan will share their last name with this name. So right now, every goblin in the clan will be blank Blackrock, Epop Blackrock, Chitin Blackrock, and so on. So we shall be the tutorial tribe. So we shall have Tink tutorial, Irix tutorial, Rish tutorial, and so on. This top slot is your king or your queen. Basically, essentially your leader. Your leader is responsible for defending your village as well as breeding new goblins. Now, in version 1.0 of the game, the leader is immortal. They will not die of old age. However, I believe your leader dying is going to end your game, as it will be a lose condition. As a result, you will want to find yourself a leader who is good in combat. I would also recommend one that has a decent to high trade skill. For example, Tink here is a good example of a leader. They have a high war stat and a half decent trade stat. Faith, I believe, is not important on a leader. But what we have right now is Goblin with more faith than more trade. None of these other goblins are really fit that mold we are looking for. You mainly want to focus on war just so that they can defend themselves better. You also may want to keep an eye on the traits they have. The traits that the leader has will be passed down to future generations. Now, it won't always be passed down, but there is a higher chance of them being passed down. So, Tink here has the Savage trait, which is not a great trait to have on goblins, as they can only be assigned to war jobs. This includes goblins who are white or orange. Now, thing about white and orange goblins is their stats are higher based on the color. Every goblin has 3 stats: war, trade, and faith. Red goblins have a higher than average war stat, white goblins have a higher than average faith stat, orange goblins have a higher than average trade stat. Now these are important things to keep an eye out for, because a savage orange goblin is not going to be able to cut down wood for you or craft tools for you. Libhouse here is going to want to be your guard, your army, your military. She is not very good at that. So this can be a good thing and a bad thing, because Libhouse here could be a great berry collector, a great peon goblin, and a dedicated one at that, because you won't be able to assign them to any other jobs they would be good at. The downside is you would not be able to assign them to jobs they would be good at. Epop is similar with the pious trait. They will only be assigned to faith jobs. There's also one for trade jobs, which is hippie. Now you'll want to repopulate your goblin tribe. Things I would recommend is avoid goblins who are too old. You want to avoid goblins like Kazlak here, who is 18, or Aura here, who is 20. Breeding age for a goblin is 10 years old. That is young and that is adult. So you want to aim for goblins who are roughly 10 years old. A little bit below or a little bit higher is fine. You do not want goblins who are old, because that will result in them dying sooner. So, I'm not going to take Awa here, but Kirigs would be a prime candidate, as would Ripsnorter and Chinstick. Now, I've seen a lot of people asking, how do you tell the difference between male and female goblins? The easiest method is male goblins have their mouth open, female goblins have their mouth closed. There are other differences, such as you can see the pose is different, but when they are covered under layers of clothing due to having a job, that can be difficult to tell, so generally you want to look for the mouth. So, here I have selected my tribe. They are not the best. You do not get to shuffle or alter your selection of goblins unless you start a new game. What you see on the left here is what you get, and you must choose from it. So, gotta take what you can get. What I would focus on is the middle stat, the orange stat. You want to focus on high trade goblins. They are some of the most important goblins you can get. Second, I would recommend high war stat goblins, as they are your defenders and your fighters. High faith goblins, such as Kirigs here, are not super important in the early game. They will be your priests and your shamans, but they are not majorly important early on. So if you have a goblin such as Rish here, who is only good at faith, try to skip over them if you can. If they're the best you got, then they're the best you got. On the right, you have the clan banner. This is purely cosmetic. Your buildings will look slightly different depending on the colors you choose. That is about it. You can also set a default if you wish. So if I were to click this button here, then this pattern and this color would become the default for every new game I create. In the middle of the right here, you can select your starting resources. This largely depends on your personal playstyle. Personally, I just go with the default, off to a good start. And at the bottom, you can choose your difficulty. Your peon for the standard gameplay, chief for a more difficult challenge, and elder for a much more experienced challenge. Personally, I will go with chief, and I will enable tutorials. So, this is your world map. Important thing to note, do not click on this flag in the middle of the screen right away. You are going to want to use your keys to take a look around first. Things to be aware of are these arches at the edge of your map. These are the entrances to your territory. If you build right here, if I were to build right here, then enemies from outside the village can easily come in. You're going to want to build far away from those. You're also going to want to look for sources of berries, rocks, and logs. You can see the resources floating above each Elder resource. The Elder resource will produce additional resources given time. You're also going to want to keep an eye out for larger nodes such as this, the iron and the stone resource. The main thing you're going to want to focus on is building near enough to berries, logs, and rocks that you can survive off of for your first few years. Stone and iron being close by is also handy. They can be a pain to get to in the long run. You're also going to want to try and avoid graveyards, such as this one, with the skull over it. Graveyards will produce more gravestones, which will produce skeletons when winter comes. Less important resources are hemp, herbs, bones, and frogs. You do not need those right away, and the collectors for those resources can wander out into the world, into the larger area, in order to collect them. Alright, where I'm going to set up is going to be right here. I have berry bushes not too far away, logs right next to me, and rocks right next to me. Important thing to note is that rocks and stone are different resources. Rocks are what you build your basic tools out of. Stone is what you build larger and later game structures out of. It is very easy to get those two confused. So, I'm going to place my village center right here. Now, as the tutorial says, you need to build a grand hall to start off with. This is going to be where all your initial goblins live, as well as your king and any breeders you set out. You're also going to want to place down a storage house as soon as you can. And as well as a crafting hut and a woodcutter hut. Now, you do not need to build all of these all at once like I did. However, I like to do that just because there is enough resources to get all of them done right away. The woodcutter hut does need tools, so you will need to wait a little bit for that until you get the crafting hut done. But they will be able to build these 3 buildings on their own without input, and relatively quickly. As the tutorial says, you will want to go into your Grand Hall, click this second tab here, and assign your breeders. You only have 10 goblins to start off with, so assigning just 1 is fine to begin with. Eventually you will want to fill out the second slot, however. As I said before, you're going to want to focus on trade stats initially, and be sure to check on the traits that they will pass on. For example, if I were to select Chinstick here as a breeder, he would have good trade and faith stats be inherited. However, he would also pass on Weakling and Insomniac. Insomniac is one of the worst traits in the game. You do not want Insomniacs. I could also select Epop, who has a very good trade stat. However, he is pious. I do not want to have more pious goblins because they cannot do proper work for war or trade-based jobs. Therefore, I'm going to choose Ulrich here, and he's going to be our breeder. It should be noted that these white, red, and orange bars here will change size based on the stats that you have select for your king and your breeders. This wheel determines the likelihood of each goblin being born. It especially has a large chance of being a green goblin and a small chance of being white, red, or orange. The higher trade stat your breeders and your king, the higher chance of your goblins being born orange, and so on. We now have a crafting hut complete. Starting the game, you're going to want to put a high trade goblin, such as Ripsnorter here, into the crafting hut. Higher trade means higher efficiency. Ripsnorter here sets this crafting hut at 55 efficiency alone. However, Chitin here sets it to 5% efficiency. So, high trade stat goblins for crafting huts, as well as a majority of as well as all of the other buildings in trade, as well as, I believe, the laboratory. Maybe a couple more around here. Starting off, you're going to want to turn off basic weapons. You do not need basic weapons to start the game with, and they will just stockpile rocks into this section without it being used. You want to focus on tools, as tools are very important. Now we have a storage, and here you can assign your hauler. A hauler is one of the most important jobs to have in the game. You're going to want to have a good number of haulers. At a rough estimate, I would say 1 to 2 haulers per 10 goblins. You can start the game with just 1. Like the crafting hut, the higher the trade stat, the higher the efficiency of the job. Chitin, low efficiency. Kirigs, 45% efficiency. You can just start out with 1 hauler to begin with. Thanks to the resource setup I chose at the beginning of this campaign, we have tools available in the storage. Thus, our woodcutter hut was created almost instantly. Like the other 2 jobs, you're going to want to focus on good trade. Unfortunately, Chimstick here, who is Weakling and Insomniac, is the best trade goblin we have right now, so I'm going to set him to be a woodcutter. He is not the best woodcutter in the world, but he is the best we have right now, and we're going to have to be okay with that. After this, I would recommend clicking to set down a Warrens wherever you can. A good strategy I have found is to place them, build near a cliff such as this, so that you can place a warrens down at the bottom. This will give your goblins easy access from the top of the cliff to the bottom of the cliff, and vice versa. If you do not have a bridge available when first selecting, rotating your structure in place can help with that. Note, not all structures will provide bridges. Some structures, such as the scavenger hut, will never have bridges connecting them. As the tutorial said, we will now want to start preparing for the winter by building a kindler. A kindler is a very important job. If you build jobs such as the kindler or the woodcutter hut close to a storehouse, then the resources to and from that job will be delivered faster. Storehouses work like Minecraft ender chests. Putting a resource into one allows you to pull it out of a different one. They all share the same inventory. You can prioritize your construction by clicking this icon here. Only one building at a time can be prioritized. If I switch, then the previous one gets changed. So you want to make sure that what you're prioritizing is the most important one. They will now focus on building this one above the other. It does not mean that they will abandon the warrens, it's just that they will put a majority of their effort into the kindler. We have just had a baby born. You can check your baby goblins by clicking this eye icon next to the baby goblin icon here. This will show you how old your babies are. When they reach 3 years old, they will be able to work. When they reach 10 years old, they will be mature adults who can be assigned to be breeders. We now have our kindler ready. You want to assign a goblin to this as soon as possible. Again, the higher the trade, the better. Kyrix is the best we got right now, so we are going to be relying on him to produce firewood for us. The tutorial is now instructing us to build a watchtower. I'm going to say you do not need to do that right now. Your king is also a defender. He will fight off winter incursions for you. For at least the first winter incursion, he can handle it on his own if you have picked a good king. He can possibly handle the entire winter. The thing about watchtowers is that they take logs, which is the same resource the kindler uses in order to create firewood, as well as the warrens in order to build it. Logs are a very important resource, and you'll likely run out very often. So I'm going to avoid building the watchtower for now to simply allow the game to run to gather as many resources as possible. Sometimes you may see situations like this, where there is a pause icon above a structure. The pause icon means that one of the building recipes has been paused. That is fine. This other icon above may show that it is missing out one of the resources. Don't worry too much about that. Simply have a good number of peons and a good number of haulers, and that should be filled eventually. Peons focus on what is the most important at any given time alongside their own needs. They will eventually fill this out with the resources it needs. The haulers are specifically designed for this. That is why they are so important. The peons can also deliver resources to structures, however they cannot carry as much, and they have to balance doing that along with all of their other chores, such as gathering food and sticks and rocks. Now as I try and place a building here, you can see that we have a circle of influence around us. This is where we can build. I can build anywhere within here so long as the building can fit. I cannot place a building outside of it, even if there is plenty of room. Not all buildings are restricted to this circle of influence. Buildings such as watchtowers and woodcutter huts can be built outside of it. If you want to know, you just need to look it up. Most of them will be built within the circle of influence, others do not need to. Most of them need to be built within the village's circle of influence. Not all of them, but most of them. The circle of influence will expand with each building placed. Warrens will expand the circle the most, so if you need more space, place a warrens down near the edge. I'm going to do that here, because I would like to expand my circle of influence down to here. Now, your goblins can travel outside of the circle of influence, It is simply where you build that is affected by it. Later in the game, when you build the war hall, there will also be a command you can click in there that will limit your goblins to traveling within the circle of influence for the most part. I believe there might be some leeway there. I'm not entirely sure. What we have here is a notification saying that Chinstick is very dissatisfied and may riot at any moment. For the most part, you don't need to worry about that. Chances are they are Insomniac. This is why Insomniac is the worst trait to get. They are perpetually upset due to not being able to sleep and thus being very tired. It's really only situations where they do not have tools or food or are overcrowded that you need to worry. When you're comfortable in the early game, you should build a well close to your village center. Wells are important for putting out fires, and as one of the loading screen tutorials says, a well is only needed when it is too late. So build at least one well early on. When your village is larger, you're going to want to build multiple wells, but when your village is relatively small like this one well in the middle should do fine. Up in the top right here, you will see I have 0 rocks and a need for 1. This is going to be a common sight. Rocks and sticks are very common resources, primarily due to the use as simple tools. It is okay to not have a stockpile of them. This generally just means that any rocks that are being harvested are being sent directly to use. This top bar here does not necessarily show the resources that are inside of the storehouse. In this case, the resources are in this initial storage. This will be wiped away later on. An important thing to note is that goblins do not eat berries, or take tools out of the storehouse. They must be delivered to the warrens. This circle here shows the amount of berries that are within the warrens. I believe all warrens share an inventory. So, this is why haulers are important. They will deliver these resources to the warrens to be consumed. As a result of this, you may reach a situation where the top bar here says you have 10 berries, but your goblins are not in danger of starving because this is full. Keep that in mind. It may be important later. Still try and keep as many berries as you can. They are a very important resource, but if this says you have very low berries, don't necessarily panic right away. We have had our first new adult join the village. You can easily check those by clicking on any vacant job and simply looking for the youngest goblin. Here we have Pun Pun, a high war and high faith stat white goblin. She could make a good guard. We have just entered winter, so I will only now place down a watchtower. You will see that they have this ring of influence there. This is the range that the archers in the guard tower will be able to shoot from. If you have any visible entrances or exits to the village, you may want to place them so that they are covered, such as here or here. Starting out, a good solution will just be to place the guard tower near the center of the village to encompass as much of it as possible. I will do that now and place my guard post here. Again, the king can fight off at least the first wave of skeletons on the difficulty I've chosen. It may be more difficult on the Elder difficulty, but on the Chief difficulty, I believe the king can handle the first wave. So if this structure is not finished by wintertime, that is fine. Here we have a clue as to where the undead will be coming from. Notice that the gravestone on the right is glowing red, while the gravestone on the left is not. Gravestones that glow red are ones that are about to spawn skeletons. As a result, you can kind of prepare. If you have a watchtower here and a watchtower here, but only enough goblins to man one of them, you can remove them from this one and place them over here to cover the entrance. In the future, this won't be too much of an issue. If you were to build a base somewhere like here where you only have one entrance or exit, then it's a lot easier to handle. So keep that in mind when placing a base, is the defensibility of this location. In my case, the best location to build was a place with multiple entrances, so that didn't quite apply for me. However, every map is different. Sometimes the best locations have the best defense. It is honestly up to chance. As we are just now approaching winter and we have a fair number of peons, I will be assigning Pun here as a singular town guard. One town guard and the king should be more than enough to handle the first winter's attacks. As the tutorial says, building a trade hall next would be a good idea. You do not need planks or any other advanced resource, and a trade hall is important to have come springtime, as a trade prince is required in order to access the merchant. So building the trade hall over the course of winter can be a good idea. Keep in mind that it requires logs, which are also used to create firewood. So if you don't have a lot of firewood by this point, you may want to hold off on the trade hall. But in general, the trade hall is a good investment. The first undead horde have risen. Note that they do not attack immediately, they just kind of wander around for a bit. You may want to keep an eye on them for a little bit, as you do not need to hit the defend the village key right away. A good idea is to simply let them come to you and only hit the button when they reach a certain distance. In this case, I'm going to say when they reach this iron ore, then I will hit it. This will allow your goblins to fill any needs and do any jobs that they can before needing to flee into the warrens. When they are inside the warrens, they cannot eat, they will not be happy, they cannot sleep. It is generally just a bad time in there. As you can see, our high war stat queen can easily handle the first wave on her own. We did not need to build this watchtower. Our trade hall is complete. As with the other buildings in the trade section of the building menu, the higher the trade stat, the better. In this case, the higher the trade stat, the better the deals from the merchant. He will buy things for more and sell things for less. So, Field is our youngest recruit. His great trade stat and a great trait. However, he is currently the best option we have for a trade prince. So, while I don't believe he will get any benefit out of the worker trade, out of the worker trait, we will put him there for now. We have now officially finished the tutorial. Continue watching for additional advice on sections later in the game, such as surviving your first winter and what to do beyond.